So tell me here, what was your first HO scale locomotive? I'm willing to bet a decent chunk of you probably had one of these. The humble Bachmann USRA 060. It's been a staple of their lineup since 1979. It's undergone a lot of changes since then, but it's remained a constant in the Bachmann lineup for over 45 years. Bachmann's original 060 only underwent changes under the hood, swapping from the old pancake motor to a proper can motor and some additional changes to make the locomotive a little more usable. The chassis is bulletproof, and the locomotive is well renowned as a project base, but Bachmann never really strayed too far from this original locomotive. Until now. By now, I mean 2021, and by 2021, I mean now. Let me explain real quick. In Bachmann's 2021 catalog, they showed off sketches for a new version of the 060 with a painted sample in the corner. People were, of course, very excited. Advertised as new and existing tooling, it promised a new take on this tired classic. Bachmann usually announces stuff about a year to a year and a half before it hits actual production. 2022 came and went, and we saw absolutely nothing of this new 060. 2023 came and went with just a couple of sample photos, but we got no release date. Finally, in late 2024, these locomotives finally hit stores with very little announcement and very little fanfare. So, it's here in front of us, and the inevitable question here is, what's actually new and what's old? The obvious new part is this body. It is all new from the ground up, but still shares some striking components from its predecessor. The tooling is basic, but it is much better than the old one and slots in as a lower mid-grade locomotive in the HO scale hierarchy. The most obvious change on this locomotive is up front. You get your choice of 3 different headlights, 2 high mount ones and a special low mount in the smoke box used by the Union Pacific. This obviously is the Union Pacific one, and it's actually a pretty reasonable representation of the prototype. The main body tooling is not designed to depict any specific USRA 060, but it does a very good job depicting a Union Pacific one specifically. I've heard people complain about the lack of boiler bands on these, but it really doesn't bother me. The Wikipedia page literally shows a USRA 060 that does not have them. The whistle is molded to the steam dome again, although at least this time it is slightly better looking and is now at least painted. The new bells look miles better than the original train set ones as well. One incredibly weird thing about this body is on the running boards. They slope down to meet the cab. I cannot think of a reason that they did this. I know a decent amount of switchers had their running boards sloped down to meet their cab, but the USRA 060, I cannot find a photo that has this particular feature. Moving around to the cab, it's quite similar to the old model, but it has new windows. I actually think I prefer the old version with the molded window frames. These new windows provide a clear view of the backhead, which actually looks worse than the 1980s one I have here. I think that backhead detail is absolutely non-essential, but I think it can elevate a model when done right. The printing on the side of the cab is absolutely top-notch, as with all of Bachmann's printing from the past 25 years or so. Let's talk about this tender. It's all new from the ground up this time and has 3 variants. There's 2 versions of the classic switching tender for both oil and coal versions, and a flat top coal tender you can find on the B&O and Pennsylvania Railroad models. All of these tenders are correct for their respective locomotives to the best of my knowledge. The only exception here is this Union Pacific one. These usually had coal tenders. But this particular locomotive operated in Oregon on the Oregon Short Line, a subsidiary of the Union Pacific, and I just could not find a photo of it. Judging by its location, it may very well have had an oil tender. These tenders are very nice. I think they're a perfect complement to this locomotive. The handrails on mine are a bit mangled thanks to some rough handling, but that's not on Bachmann. I particularly like the inclusion of the top handrails on the top of the tall coal tenders. It's not included with this oil burning version, although I have found tenders like this without the top handrails, so there's a chance that the real oil burner may not have had them. The tender once again has a rear headlight, but this time it is actually functional. I only noticed this recently, but there's different headlights depending on the tender. Flat top tenders have a lower headlight. That's kind of neat. There's actual hanging brake detail on this, and it's acceptable for this price point. The tender trucks look incredibly good as well. The only wish of mine with tenders is that they did more of them. The old 060 had 3 unique tender types, and honestly, I think they could work here with minimal changes. The tender also has pickups for the very first time. The old DCC 060s were locomotive only pickup. The locomotive and tender connection is now thankfully a metal drawbar this time with 2 slots to change the distance between locomotive and tender. The tender also houses the speaker for this locomotive. This locomotive's chassis is not all new. It is shared a lot with the original, and that's not exactly a bad thing. The old model may have looked odd in the body department, but it certainly had a good chassis and ran well. This is a minor update to that chassis with a redesigned die-cast bottom. The main thing giving it away is the hole for the smoke unit at the front of the chassis. These new ones do not have smoke units. The chassis really shows its age in the rods, or more accurately, the crossheads. They're thick on the real 060s, but they are not this thick. The worst part is mine don't even seem to do a great job of keeping the rods in check. It doesn't affect performance, but it is a bit unsightly. Some closed-off cylinders would have done wonders to counteract this issue. I glued some styrene to the back of mine to rectify this issue, although I have seen some concerns about the durability of the crossheads due to their plastic construction. It worked fine on the old 060, and I think it'll continue to be fine here. Mercifully, one of the worst features of the old model has been corrected: disassembly. There's no more stupid little tabs at the front of the locomotive that nobody can seemingly accurately locate. It's 4 screws in the 4 corners of the locomotive to remove the body from the chassis. What a novelty! Let's talk performance. This is where this little locomotive really comes into its own. The update to the chassis in the 2000s did wonders for performance on the old model, and Bachmann switching these decoders to an economy has done wonders for motor control. The locomotive has very good and consistent speed control. It doesn't lurch, and having all-wheel pickup keeps the locomotive moving through switches even at low speeds. It's also a modern Bachmann locomotive, so it'll probably run until the sun explodes with some proper care. Bachmann heard all of our complaints and finally opted to give these things a front coupler. Finally, it only took 45 years, but hey, we got here in the end. Both front and rear of the locomotive has Bachmann Easy Mate Mark II couplers. These are acceptable couplers, but I'll be swapping mine out for KD's whenever I decide to finally order them. The locomotive is capable of pulling about a dozen cars on level track. This isn't a problem, nor should it be. This is an 060, not a 484. This seems about right for this little guy. This locomotive is sound equipped, and this actually differs from the original announcement. Bachmann announced these with WOW sound decoders back in 2021. In 2023, they quietly updated the locomotive's description with economy decoders. My best guess is that this was to keep costs down. Bachmann has been putting economy decoders in a lot of these beginner-level sound locomotives like the 440 and the GP40. These are miles better than the original Bachmann sound decoders they were using about a decade ago. The sound quality on this locomotive is actually quite good. The noises are clear and they don't sound bit crunch. Chuffs don't cut each other off like a Broadway Limited product. This is an economy, so they had to have cuts made in the amount of sounds and functions this decoder has. But it's not super limited. I did not get a recording of all the sounds, but this decoder comes with selectable whistles, bells, exhaust chuffs, air pumps, and dynamos. I have not tested all these sound features, as I thought this decoder only went up to function 9. The quick start guide included with this locomotive is clearly outdated and only lists functions 0 through 9. It lists F5 as NA, when really it activates the coasting function. The link on their website lists extra sound features that I had no idea existed. I don't have a throttle and can't really do functions higher than 9, so I'll post a short companion video in the description when I have access to that sort of throttle. The locomotive's biggest problem comes from 20 years ago, in the form of the Proto 2000 060. Proto had stellar steam locomotives back in the early 2000s, and that lineup included a USRA 060. It's the definitive model of the USRA 060, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. I did manage to get this one side by side with the Bachmann for a little bit, and even got to doublehead them for a bit. The Proto 060 is by far the more detailed of the two, but you all knew this. Proto always excelled with detail. But how do they stack up performance-wise? Honestly, pretty similar. The Proto pulls better, but they can match each other in smoothness. The Proto, however, has one major issue. Proto 2000 locomotives have become increasingly desirable as of late, and a lot of Proto 2000 locomotives used to be able to pick up for $100 have doubled in value. A standard DC version of the Proto 060 tends to go for a similar price as this Bachmann DCC sound model brand new. Proto prices are kind of all over the place, but they only seem to be on the up and up, unfortunately. Bachmann's new 060 has quickly become my favorite steam switcher. It's reliable, looks decent enough, and the new front coupler makes it an obvious choice for this sort of play. Bachmann has done exactly what they needed to do with the 060. They didn't fix what wasn't broken. These are ripe for project fodder, and I'm excited to see what railroaders will do with these in the future. This locomotive is more than just project fodder. It's truly one of the last of its kind. Switchers are getting harder and harder to find, not just with steam, and currently the only 3 HO scale steam locomotives are all 060s. The old and new Bachmann 060s, and one Broadway Limited PRR B6 that goes for stupid prices. These are charming little locomotives, and if you're in the market for a little switcher, this is certainly probably the top choice to currently consider.